The regular meeting of the Minneapolis Police Conduct Oversight Commission will now begin.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to the regular virtual meeting of the Police Conduct Oversight Commission. Today is October 12th, 2021. As we begin, I will note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by members of the commission and city staff as authorized under Minnesota statute section 13D.021 due to the declared local public health emergency. The city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. The meeting is public and subject to the Minnesota open meeting law. For the record, my name is Andrew Hawkins and I serve as the Chief of Staff for the Department of Civil Rights. As this body is currently without a chair, I am standing in to convene the beginning portion of the meeting. With that said, will the clerk please call the roll to verify the presence of quorum?
Commissioner Sarah.
Present.
Commissioner Crockett. Commissioner McGuire.
Present.
Commissioner Pino.
Present.
Commissioner Sparks.
Present.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Present.
Commissioner Crockett.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Sorry, I was muted. Let the record reflect we have quorum. The first action this body needs to take is to select an acting chair to manage the agenda and elect officers. Can I have a motion to appoint an acting chair?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right. And then I suppose
Mr. Hawkins.
Yep.
Assistant City Attorney Fussy. And I could confirm with the clerk, but I believe that what's needed is a motion to, I guess, nominate or suggest a commissioner to act in that capacity.
I nominate Abigail Sarah to act in such capacity. Seconded.
Could I clarify who made the nomination?
That's Commissioner Pino made the nomination.
Thank you.
All right, and do we need to call the roll on that, or well, I believe we have a second?
We have a
Commissioner
second.
Sylvester will second that.
I accept the nomination, and I mean, am I supposed to give some remarks, or I'm honored to be a part of this commission, and I'm very passionate about this work, and I really appreciate the nomination of 2 of my colleagues, and I would do my best to uphold the chair position.
All right. Lisa, do we need to do a full vote or anything, or are we okay?
We do need to do a vote. There's been a motion made and a second, so I will call the roll. Commissioner Sarah.
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Well, thank you, commissioners. I'm really honored. At this moment, then, I believe the next item on the agenda would be to elect a vice chair. Is that right, Ms. Brock?
It is correct. And Commissioner Sarah, I'm going to email you the script so that you have that to work off of for the rest of the meeting.
And
so if we...
Madam Acting Chair and Clerk, this is City Attorney Fussy again. I just want to, it's obviously a very, different situation since we were in the absence of a chair and a vice chair, which makes things a little more difficult. My understanding is that Commissioner Sarah has been appointed as the acting commissioner for the purposes of running the meeting until I guess your next action would be taken, which would be either to elect a full-time chair and then to elect a full-time vice chair. Or I know there had been some discussion of possibly making a recommendation from the clerk and the civil rights staff to just have an acting chair for the foreseeable until the full commission membership would be filled out. I think that would happen in January, such that I guess all of the wards or all of the commission districts could be filled, and that there could be a vote for a permanent chair and vice chair at that time. But ultimately, it's up to the commission as to what route they might want to go. I don't know if staff had any thoughts on the concept of simply appointing an acting chair that would be a temporary chair until a full election could take place with a full commission.
Yeah, I think when we've done this, I think my understanding was like we needed to have a chair to run the meeting at least up until we get to the election. So I know there's like the acceptance of minutes and everything, and then I believe the election was the fourth item. But if that's wrong, I can definitely pivot.
No, if that's, I'd defer to the clerk in terms of where we are in the agenda.
That is correct. We need to adopt the agenda, accept the minutes, and then move on to the election item on the agenda. Have you received the script, Commissioner Sarah?
I'm sorry. I think my audio might have broken out. Ms. Brock, what was the last thing you said?
I asked if you had received the script in your email.
Yes, I have.
Okay, so the next item would be at the upper half of page 2, adoption of the agenda.
Next, we'll proceed to our agenda, a copy of which has been posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda? And if so, is there a second? I recognize myself. I make a motion to amend the agenda. I have 4 items that I think should be on tonight's agenda for discussion, and they are as follows. First, an update on the staffing of OPCR in the Civil Rights Department. Second, the issue of PCOC quorum. Third, an update or discussion on the PCOC appointment process. And fourth, staff interaction with the PCOC.
Commissioner Sparks, I'll second.
Would the clerk please call the roll on that motion to adopt, or excuse me, motion to amend the agenda?
Commissioner Sarah.
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Great. So that motion carries. I would suggest that those 4 discussion items be placed after the elections, since I think we sort of need to have the elections to move forward with our business.
Commissioner Sarah, just to make sure that my records are accurate, could you remind me what number 4 was?
Staff interaction with the PCOC, with the commission.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next item is the acceptance of the minutes from the meeting of August 10th, 2021. May I have a motion to accept the minutes?
It's Commissioner Sparks. I'll make a motion to accept.
Second from Commissioner Pino.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sarah,
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett,
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire,
Aye.
Commissioner Pino,
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks,
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That motion carries, and the minutes for the August 10th meeting are accepted. The next order of business is the election of the Commission's officers. I will call on staff to provide a recommendation relating to the election procedures, and then I recommend that we have some discussion as a commission. Is there someone from the staff who would like to provide information?
Yep, it's Andrew again. I can speak to this part. This also kind of serves as an update on where we're at in the recruitment process. So as you all know, civil rights staff are currently working on recruitment for multiple commissions. Beginning last year, this process was revisited in an effort to expand the scope of recruitment to include an increased emphasis on equity in groups that have been consistently underrepresented on our commissions. This effort is being done through increased collaboration with a number of city departments who are tasked with neighborhood outreach, equity, inclusion, and diversity work. The first year of these efforts resulted in the most diverse commission we've ever seen by almost any measure, geographic diversity included. Unfortunately, with several recent departures, we find ourselves in a similar situation. And so in the interest of ensuring equitable representation and opportunity and the deadline for applications closing at the end of this month, it's the recommendation of civil rights staff that the commission consider the election of an acting chair to serve until all vacancies can be filled and the body and the full body can participate in the nomination and election process. But again, that's the recommendation of staff, and you certainly have the opportunity to discuss it and go in whatever direction you see fit.
This is Acting Chair Sarah, and I have a question. What would be the difference between acting chair and permanent chair? My understanding was that there would be a new election for chair in 2022, even if we hadn't had these departures. So I'm just a little confused what the difference is.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're hoping to close everything in October and get everybody in, and it's possible that we have some new people on board by December. So I think with the acting chair designation too, it doesn't. I think some of it depends on when your term expires and when your term would run to. So I believe yours is up at the end of this year. So I mean, there would be a natural point to revisit it. But if it was somebody in the acting chair role that where they would have gone further, like their term doesn't end for another year. Then it would have been less clear. So by saying let's have it as acting until we get to that point where we have everybody on board and they're allowed to participate. It's also, since we're still doing recruitment too, like we want people that are applying and everything to make sure it's clear that they have an opportunity to do all this. So
I believe I saw a hand from Commissioner Pino.
Yeah, it was a question version of exactly what Andrew Hawkins mentioned. So I do have a pending motion. Since we do have I'd like to make a motion if the chair would recognize me for that as well.
Chair recognizes Commissioner Pino.
I move that the PCOC continue, takes the staff recommendation and continue with acting chair Sarah for the remainder of the year.
Any discussion on that point from any other commissioners? I guess if I would like to offer some discussion in that this feels different than what has happened in the past, and I've only been on for less than 2 years. But this is now the full commission, such as it is, and we've advocated very strongly to have these positions filled and move forward. It seems like I don't know that there's a huge difference, but it seems like if we want to move forward as a commission to be as strong as we can be, we should have a chair and a vice chair, and then in 2022, when we hopefully have a full commission, or perhaps I should say 9 members appointed, full in that way, then it would be time for new elections anyway, is my understanding.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Sylvester. I agree with that. I think we've had some pretty empty agendas
in the last couple of months, and it's such a crucial time for the work that we're doing here. I don't like the idea of temporary folks. I think we need to make this permanent, and we need to push as hard as we can through the end of the year. And I think it also sets a better precedent for anybody else joining us in the future, that we do have kind of strong, stable leadership. Yeah, so I would advocate that we elect permanent chair and vice chair tonight.
Thank you. I recognize Commissioner Pino. Did you have your hand up?
I do, and apologies, I'm on my phone and my camera's not the best, which is why I'm, you just see my headshot here. But the reason why, speaking frankly, the reason why I moved to have you as acting chair is because I trust you in your motivations to continue this commission, which is why I nominated you in the first place. And I know that your term ends at the end of the year. And I'm more than happy to withdraw this motion, but I just know I personally don't have the capacity to be in a more of a leadership role than being the audit chair. And you and I are the two people who have our terms end. So if that being the case, if we do withdraw this motion and we do have a full election of a full chair, it is incumbent upon those who do not have their terms and to take those leadership roles if they're ready to do so. I know that's a big task for somebody who's only been here for a year, and like Commissioner Sylvester said, it hasn't been the most active year. So again, more than happy to withdraw my motion here, but this is what I saw as the most pragmatic step forward. If we do withdraw this motion and we have a vote on a full chair, I'm totally for it. Just want to make sure that people are ready to take on those roles. Otherwise, we have you as an acting chair and people have a couple more months to get ready to take on that leadership role. That was my thinking.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Pino. My intent would be, I recognize Commissioner Sylvester.
I completely agree with Commissioner Pino in a lot of what he's saying, but I think in the next couple of months, the power of the chair of this body is setting the agenda. And I want to set big, giant agendas. And I want, what I've seen from, and I'm just going to come out and say, what I've seen from Chair Sarah in the last couple of months, really the last year, I suppose, 9 months, on the Policy and Procedure Committee is Harvard professors, experts in their field, talking about misdemeanors, just putting in like real big agendas together to move information forward and to build big giant work on that subcommittee. And I would like that to be taken to the full commission. And I think there's just a little more clout in being able to do that as a permanent chair versus an acting chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Sylvester. Recognizing Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Acting Chair Sarah. I just wanted to confirm from Mr. Hawkins, these vacancies, are we expecting that they would be filled within the next few months, or is everyone starting potentially in January? Will we have new members during these basically the end of Acting Chair Sarah's and Commissioner Pino's terms?
Yep. Again, I think the goal is always to get people, once we have things closed, to move as quickly as we can to get people, on board and staffed up. It's definitely like, I think if this, if December is the goal, it's like obviously November, as everybody knows, there's probably a lot going on that month in terms of getting, council members and their staff to sit down with us for interviews. But I think we'd like to try it if we can. I mean, the election happens early enough that I don't think that that's completely undoable. And then we'd also probably want to do a training for the new members as well. But for right now, I think the goal is to get people on board here in December, and at the latest, have them ready for the first of the year.
Well, with all of this discussion, recognizing myself, Acting Chair Sarah, my opinion for discussion is I think we should have a permanent chair and a permanent vice chair. And by permanent, I mean, until next year, until the next round of appointments. The appointment process, frankly, has been a little wonky for the past couple of years. We don't know what's going to happen with it. And I think any word in front of the word chair or vice chair, like acting or interim, it sends the wrong message. And I think we'd like to move forward as strongly as possible as a group and as a commission. And my intent, I can just speak for myself as acting chair, my intent would absolutely be to mentor and work with anyone who's interested in a leadership role, either as chair, vice chair, committee chair. You know, that's 100% my intent, and I would love to do that. Including individuals who might be elected in December, but not feel quite ready until, you know, they had a few meetings under their belt or something. Recognizing Commissioner Pino.
I mean, for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to withdraw my motion and replace it with a motion to appoint Abigail Sarah, or to elect Abigail Sarah as our chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Pino. So we are, I just want to make sure we are moving forward as a group. We appreciate the comments from staff, and we've made a decision as a group to move, or what Commissioner Pino is proposing is to move forward with a permanent chair and vice chair election, not acting chair and vice chair. Commissioner Sparks.
Thank you. I just had a question on the, what was the term that we're discussing? What's the term length? And you may have mentioned that, and I may have missed it.
I believe it's through the end of this year, through December 31st.
And so we would have a new election January or February. Okay.
Yes.
And was, just so I'm clear, and again, I'm sorry if this was discussed and I missed it, but was there any difference? Is it just semantics between interim chair and vice chair and regular chair and vice chair? Or is there a real difference between the positions other than the names, you know, functionally?
This is Assistant City Attorney Fussy. I don't believe there's any difference.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Then, I mean, really, I agree with Commissioner Sarah's comments. I think we should move forward strongly together, united, in going with electing full positions. I'd be in favor of that.
Thank you. Any further discussion before I ask the clerk to call the roll on Commissioner Jackson, or Commissioner Pino's motion? Very well. Would the clerk please call the roll on Commissioner Pino's motion to elect a chair and vice chair, not acting chair and vice chair?
Point of order. Sorry. My motion was to elect you chair. And we have not had a discussion on vice chair yet.
Yes, and I would jump in and say there's a procedure that has to be followed with regard to the election. And first, it's the chair that's elected first. There initially has to be a round of nominations. It sounds like there's unanimity that the acting chair may become the permanent chair, but we'd have to go through the proper procedure and ask for nominations. And then once those nominations are in, a vote can be had.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Fussy, and thank you, Commissioner Pino. Will the clerk please call the roll on Commissioner Pino's motion to elect a permanent chair? And I believe I've been nominated for this.
Commissioner Sarah.
I think you just said my name, and if so, I vote aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That motion carries. And now, Mr. Fussy, just checking in, is that sufficient to elect me permanent chair, or are you saying there needs to be a further nomination process?
I think it does. I think maybe the process that should be used for the vice chair is that you open the floor for any nominations. And once we have the entire list of nominations, we can have a vote. Although I think by unanimous consent, it was clear that you were the only proposed nominee for the position of chair.
Actually, the Commissioner Sarah, your script details the outline for how to proceed.
Very good.
So
okay.
it would start with the election of the chair, opening the floor to nominations, and then proceeding to the election.
Okay. Consistent with the rules, we will begin with the election of the chair, and then we will handle the election of the vice chair. Any commissioner may nominate any member, including themselves, to be considered for election. Nominations do not require a second. After nominations have closed, each individual who has been nominated will be given a few minutes to explain why they would like to be considered for the position. When speeches have concluded, members may enter a question and answer period with the candidates before the vote is taken on the election of the officer. We will follow that process for the election of the vice chair. Are there any questions about the process as I've explained it? Okay, we will now open the floor to a brief question and answer so that, excuse me. Let's see, beg your pardon. The floor is now open to nominations for the position of vice chair. Are there any nominations for the position of vice chair?
I'm going to jump in again, and I apologize that this is kind of painstaking, but I think, and I'll defer to the clerk, but I think we need to go through that formal nominations period for the position of chair as it's laid out in the script, just to make sure that everything's done properly here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk.
I believe that is
Okay.
correct, Mr. Fussy.
Clerk Brock and Attorney Fussy, this is Ken Daler from the clerk's office. I tend to agree with you, Mr. Fussy, that you know, by unanimous consent, I think this body has agreed that Sarah is now the chair. And I don't think there's a need to go through that, you know, that whole rigmarole when it's clear the body has kind of made its decision. So I would proceed to the election of vice chair. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Dollar. I'll open the floor to nominations for vice chair. I would love to nominate anyone who is interested. In order to observe open meeting laws, I didn't contact anyone or have any sort of discussion outside of this meeting. So forgive me. I'm not sure who among us may be actually interested, and if anyone would like to raise their hand and share their interest, I would support that person. Absolutely. I believe Commissioner Pino just said you were not interested.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the capacity beyond being audit chair right now. But since I'm talking, I would happily nominate Commissioner Sparks as our vice chair.
Oh, that's quite a compliment. Thank you.
I believe seconds are not required, but I certainly second Commissioner Sparks. Are there any further nominations or anyone who would like to be Minnesotan and raise their hand and share interest, and then I will nominate them if they can't quite do it themselves? Okay, let me get back to my script. Okay. With no further nominations, I will close the nomination period. We will now recognize Commissioner Sparks for brief comments, and then we will open up the floor. Commissioner Sparks?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm a little surprised I was nominated, but I'm pleased to accept any nomination. I just want to say I'm really passionate about this work. I'm proud to be with this group of individuals. I think we've been through a lot and learned a lot in the last, not even a year. And I really want to continue that work and see it through as strongly as possible, including the next generation, if you will, of commissioners as they start to come on board. So thanks, and I'm like seriously and severely humbled.
Thank you. And this is Chair Sarah. I'd like to offer my comments that I think Commissioner Sparks is an excellent candidate. And also, I really like the idea of having one, shall we say, returning member. I won't call myself senior, and one new this year member. I think that's a nice compliment to have, to have continuity as we move forward as a full commission. Any further questions for Commissioner Sparks? Okay, with that, we will proceed to the election of vice chair. When the clerk calls your name, please respond with the name of the candidate of your choice to serve as vice chair. A majority is required to elect an officer. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sarah.
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
I, Jordan Sparks.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Commissioner Sparks.
There are 6 ayes for Commissioner Sparks.
And gold stars to Commissioner Pino and Sylvester for doing it correctly as instructed. Very well done. Congratulations, Commissioner Sparks, Vice Chair Sparks. We're very happy to have you. The next order of business is the acceptance of public comments. I will open the floor and invite comments from the community. We will limit the public comment period to no more than 2 minutes per speaker. With that, are there any community members on the line who wish to address the commission? I believe you
Hi,
must.
If I may, this is Dave Bicking. Just got myself unmuted. Yes, I want to congratulate the new chair and vice chair, and thank you both for your service. I also very much appreciate those additions to the agenda. I haven't had time to think too much about them, but and I'll have some comments about the selection process of case summaries when we get to the public hearing on that. Yes, I think an update on staffing would be very helpful, since it's really questionable who's running the Civil Rights Department and the OPCR at this time. And of course, how many people are able to help with the work of the PCOC. I'm very disappointed that last month's meeting was canceled for lack of quorum, particularly because there wasn't a lack of quorum, and though I'm sure it's an error, that's pretty egregious in my mind. That's an important thing that people should know. Both the clerk, the legal assistant, and members of the commission, frankly. So, yeah, I'd be very interested in the discussion of the staff interaction with the PCOC. So I'll let people talk about those. You have a lot to cover. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Going once, going twice. Okay. Hearing no further comment, I move to the next item on the agenda.
Hi, can I make a comment real quick? This is Emma Peterson.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just want to say I'm unaligned, and I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion about the PCOC appointment process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Okay, going once, going twice, closing public comment period, and moving on to the next order of business, which I believe is an update on the staffing of the OPCR and Civil Rights Department. Not to put anyone on the spot, but is there someone on the call from the city who could provide an update to the commission, please?
I believe some of that was going to be addressed when they got to the discussion of the case summaries. So if we want to wait for that part, we can always do it to dovetail off that. I wasn't sure if that, I don't think I realized when we amended everything that we added things in earlier.
Well, my question, I literally want to know who will be acting as the director of the Civil Rights Department and who will be acting as the director of OPCR, which means that person would be the joint supervisor. Just
So
that level. Yeah.
sure. Okay. Yeah, like Carolina, are you on? Like you can hop on now. So like Carolina Amini is our investigations manager. Like the way that everything's set up right now is that the person who's reviewing cases, assigning cases, can also be the director's designee. So Carolina was designated by Director Jafar. Like since Director Jafar still has not formally separated from the city, that's going to continue. That'll continue for now, and then with the hopes that that'll continue until we're able to have somebody in that spot permanently. So Carolina, I don't know if you wanted to hop on and
Yeah,
speak.
absolutely. Hi,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Carolina Amini. Thank you for the introduction, Andrew.
Can you do your camera?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. One second. Okay. Can everybody see me? Hello, everyone. Sorry again. This is Carolina Amini. I am, like Andrew had said, the manager of investigations. I used to be an intake investigator for a few years. I started with OPCR in 2019 as an intake investigator and have been in that position up until recently. And as of now, I was a designee to be a part of the JTS in signing cases.
So, Ms. Amini, are you the joint supervisor with Internal Affairs now?
Yes, for OPCR, I will be part of the joint supervisors along with the commander of internal affairs. Yes.
Okay, very good. And who will be, thank you and welcome. Pardon me for being rude. Who will be the director of the Civil Rights Department?
I haven't received any new information on that. Andrew, do you have anything?
Sure. Yeah, this came up at budget as well, so I can answer it kind of the same way. So obviously, it's the appointment of the directors. If the mayor's office is responsible for that, I believe there is a search process underway to bring in a director like to lead the department. But for the time being, that role remains unfilled. But we have people in positions, and we've been able to operate together, and the work's kept moving forward. So we'll keep doing that until we get somebody in that position full time. But obviously, we've had a good amount of turnover in that spot, and it's definitely not an easy position to hold. So hopefully they can find a good candidate. We get somebody in, and I know staff will definitely be happy to have somebody on board in a full-time capacity. But in the interim, again, that's kind of back to the whole acting interim. It's a very popular title in the city right now. We'll keep everything moving forward as we can. So we're fortunate. I said this in the budget, and I'll say it again now every chance I get. It's like we have a great group of dedicated staff that have kept everything going during some pretty adverse times, given the past 18 months or so. So
absolutely. Recognizing Commissioner Sylvester.
Hey, Andrew, I just want to thank you for your work. I guess I understood that there were some staffing challenges, but kind of hearing you tonight, putting that stuff in perspective, I really appreciate the work. Thank you very much.
Oh, I mean, definitely, man. The appreciation's appreciated. I know it's appreciated by staff. I mean, they've obviously done a very big lift. I mean, the OPCR staff that you all, get to work with, had the, highest caseload by almost double, over the past year. And that was before we brought on 3 new people. So, I mean, we had, senior investigators, answering phones and calling people back. And I mean, they stepped up. And like, I know that, during the budget address, this came up where it was like, well, you've had a lot of turnover. And I kind of made a point. It's like, well, we've had a lot of appointed turnover. It's like, however, it's like, given just the staff that we had going into the beginning of the pandemic, we lost 2 people. That's it. We lost somebody in our equity division, and we lost somebody in complaint investigations, both, to good opportunities. So, I mean, that's a turn, like our retention rate is 93% during what I have to believe is probably one of the harder, like one of the harder periods that the civil rights departments had to go through. So, so that says a lot about the people that, we're blessed to work with. So again, on behalf of the staff, I appreciate the sentiment.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure that's seconded by all of us. We all appreciate your efforts, your dedication. And just for one point of clarification, I believe the operating rules for the commission say that the chair shall meet with the director of OPCR at least monthly. So at least at this moment, I would be meeting with Ms. Amini. Is that how you understand it, Mr. Hawkins and Ms. Amini?
Yeah, Carolina, I can defer to you on.
Yeah, absolutely. I will, unless you want to reach out to me, I can reach out to you maybe after this meeting, or tomorrow I can send you an email. Absolutely.
Great. We'll talk offline. Thank you for clarifying that publicly. I think that was important discussion to have in the public, so I appreciate that update. Any further questions or discussion for that particular point of business? Hearing none, I'll move us to the next agenda item, which I can't remember which I said first. I think I said PCOC quorum is the next item of discussion.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I just, for some reason, I have it in my head that the amended items were tagged on to the end. Totally fine if they're not. I've just been like holding my breath, ready to give you my subcommittee report. Just wondering whether or not I'm correct in the order of the agenda as amended by the group at the beginning of this meeting.
Excellent question. I put forward these amended items. I don't remember if I specifically said if they must happen before the committee updates. I'll defer to staff. Ms. Brock, shall we move to the committee updates? I'm happy to circle back.
I believe what I heard was that you moved them to after the election of the chair, but it's your discretion to move it wherever you would like.
My mistake. I just heard it was at the end of the agenda. I apologize, everybody.
No problem. Okay, then let's move forward to the next agenda item, PCOC quorum. Just a point of summary, we have lost 3 people by resignations, so we're now down to 6 appointed members. The ordinance does say a majority of the members, but no fewer than 4 must make quorum. I think this issue has been resolved over email, but I want to, this is a public body, so I think it needs to be discussed publicly. I believe at this time, our quorum is 4. We are 6 members. The majority would be 4. And if we were to lose another member, our quorum would not drop lower because there is that, there is that floor with our ceiling. Floor, that floor with the ordinance. Does Mr. Dollar want to be recognized, or does anyone want to be recognized on this point? Vice Chair Sparks.
Thank you, Chair Sarah. Yeah, so I think that was my understanding as well over email. We resolved it so that the quorum, our current quorum with our current membership is 4. I think the question came up as well that on the agenda, the quorum is noted as 5, and I think we had an explanation that that was just something LIMS does. It fills in quorum as 5, but I think it's still something that has created and will continue to create some confusion, especially being that it's, just an inaccurate number. My understanding is that to change that within LIMS would be a very heavy lift. So I wondered if there was some sort of a stopgap measure we could introduce a note somewhere else in the agenda, perhaps, about what the correct quorum number is, just so we're not spending city resources on something that's sort of minor like that.
I think that's an eloquent resolution, Vice Chair Sparks. Would anyone from the city be able to say, like, whether we could just put a note in the agenda or, do a workaround?
Chair Sarah, Ken Daler from the clerk's office and the manager of legislative support services. Yes, we can explore to see if there's a simpler kind of fix to it. As was explained, it is a little bit more complicated because of the system isn't really set up to have kind of a floating quorum that changes as the body changes. And as you'll remember, we kind of had to make a quick decision a month ago, and we kind of made a determination based on the fact that council has established that this body has 9 positions, and we made a decision at the spur of the moment, and the city clerk, Casey Carl, has made it very clear that, the body is now 6 members and that the quorum is 4. So, I'm happy to say that publicly and kind of apologize for any confusion that happened at the last meeting when we had to make a decision at the last minute. But we'll see if there's maybe kind of as you said, a more kind of elegant and tentative workaround to just kind of ensure that we're all on the same page going forward.
And I would say even if it's quick and dirty rather than elegant, I think would still be very helpful. So thank you, Mr. Dollar.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Vice Chair Sparks. Any further discussion or questions on the issue of quorum for the PCOC? Hearing none, I'll move us to our next agenda item, the PCOC appointment process. I know Mr. Hawkins is anxious to talk about it. I have a few items I would like to discuss as well. I understand that MPD will be participating again in this selection process. And a community member has brought up specifically the fact that any applicants cannot have an open complaint against MPD. Those are two things that I would like to discuss. Maybe Mr. Hawkins, you should just start by talking about the appointment process and how it's moving forward, and we can open it up from discussion there.
Sure. So last year, obviously, like I kind of alluded to earlier, there was obviously, we had a really high volume. OPCR was definitely stretched about as thin as they could be. So when we were talking about, commissions and how we were going to manage things and the appointment process moving forward, one of the solutions was, to have kind of my division, which is the administration division of civil rights, sort of take over this process so that we had kind of a standardized approach to this across, we have the Minneapolis Commission on Civil Rights, we have the Workplace Advisory Commission or Committee, and then we have, we have the PCOC. So the PCOC and MCCR kind of operate in more similar scopes. The Workplace Advisory Committee sort of represents the various agencies, so it's a little bit different, but yeah, so the goal was just to kind of find, some consistency with how we were approaching this. I know I think both groups and historically have, kind of had, a little differing processes, just based on the structure commission and everything. And so given that, we were in the situation, I took this over. I was fortunate to have some capacity that I was able to leverage from our equity staff who came in. We also worked with our neighborhood community relations group. And then at least some of what is now like the city's race and equity group was able to participate as well. And so kind of one of the things that was identified, both through conversations with previous chairs in the previous commission, as well as just staff and just kind of people generally around the city, was that historically there's been a distinct like underrepresentation of specific wards in specific groups in the city on our boards and commissions. Obviously it's something where it requires a lot of time. Generally there's like the requirement people come to City Hall to have meetings in person. So I mean, there's a lot of contributing factors, but the goal was to basically, it was out of something very, kind of hectic, came something good where we were able to leverage some other groups that had, various specialties to come in and help us figure out how we could do this process, in a way that attracts a more diverse group of applicants, make sure we get representation from some of those wards that we weren't seeing historically, as well as like pulling people from groups that more accurately represent like the city of Minneapolis as a whole, as well as, groups that are being adversely impacted by interactions with the police. So that was kind of the focus of our effort. I think it was very successful, as I alluded to earlier. It was certainly the most diverse group we've had. I think to date, at least as far back as I can remember. So that was definitely a positive to it. But kind of building on that, it is something that we're trying to build out more deliberately and more formally, with those groups and kind of leveraging the skill sets that various areas of the city have. So that there's kind of a wider lens on this. So I know there's, again, I guess I can keep going in terms of, what the actual other parts of the process entailed. So, the other thing that we did was, again, it was kind of one of the upsides to this remote, there's very few upsides, but but one of the upsides to this remote, environment we find ourselves in is that we were able to invite, all the members and members or a designee from City Council, from our standing committee, in the city to participate in the interview process. So some, we had the participation from some council members, we had some staff come. We also have representation from the mayor, the mayor's office that would be there. We had, our staff, equity staff, and then you can have staff from OPCR that participates. In terms of the MPD involvement, last year, we, obviously just as another member of the Joint Supervisors, we always want to invite, the commander. So Commander Wheeler was invited to participate in an observation capacity. So, that way they can kind of get an idea for what the process entails, what we're doing, like what this looks like. And I mean, that's something that we feel is a good, like a good opportunity to extend to them, just so that they understand sort of, the effort that's being put into deliberately recruiting, like members, and, like being very deliberate in our interviews. And I mean, I think for everybody that participated in that process last year, I mean, you can obviously speak to your own experience, but yeah, so it was something that I think we'd like to continue. And definitely saw some success with, and just kind of bringing in all those people, like it adds a layer of transparency that I felt like was appropriate and necessary, just so that when we do have questions, it's one of those where, there's a very wide range of people that can speak to, their experience with the process. So, yeah, I don't know if that didn't cover everything, let me know, I can go back. I know I talk fast, and so if there's something I skipped over or missed, I'm happy to repeat it.
I'm turning off my camera. I'm having internet issues, so I'm hoping that's helpful. So I apologize, but I would just like to say that having a police officer there, even in an observatory capacity, or I can't remember your term, I think that's still, at least outwardly, and this is nothing personal against any individual officer, but I think that really blurs the lines of separation between the civilian oversight space and the police department, and it could potentially cause interview subjects, people being interviewed, to feel that they had to somehow amend their remarks, or maybe not be as forthcoming in the remarks if there was actually a police officer sitting on the interview panel. And when I did this, Commander Wheeler did, and so I don't know if this individual will be asking questions. I see a hand from Commissioner Sylvester. Commissioner Sylvester?
Yeah, I'll speak to that point. I think I look at that point, I guess, and at the time I didn't think anything of it when I interviewed for this. But it's almost like having an officer at a gas station, right? Like that officer might not say anything to you, but the point of hiring that off-duty officer at the gas station is to have that uniform presence there. And if that person is not going to object to your nomination or ask you questions in the interview, which I don't think I received any, that physical presence is there, could be seen as intimidation. I don't know.
Recognizing Commissioner or Vice Chair Sparks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I tend to agree with Commissioner Sylvester. It could easily be perceived, that presence, as intimidation or something along those lines, even if intimidation isn't the right word. And I would hate for anybody to feel uncomfortable or less forthcoming or less straightforward or anything like that because of that presence. I think that it is possible that it has a deleterious effect, even if we're not conscious of it.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. And devil's advocate, I struggle to think of the positive effect that having a uniformed officer present would have. I can't think of one. But can anybody else think of one?
I cannot. Thank you, Vice Chair Sparks. I recognize Commissioner Pino.
So I want to start off by saying I too agree with the perspectives that other people said. That yeah, there's definitely a chance that a uniformed police officer could have an impact. And yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't say that my phrasing in my own interview process was catered to making sure that it was palatable. And I think this goes to what I don't mean to be putting words in your mouth, Andrew, but to the manner in which this invitation has been extended to the police department is often the way in which the PCOC engages with MPD. As everyone here knows, we don't have a hammer. We don't have any teeth. We, as our one of our past chairs say, we wield a paintbrush, right? It is influence and building bridges that allow us to have some of the success that we've had in the past. And what we're looking at right there when we invite a uniformed police officer into this interview process is exactly that. It is trying to extend an olive branch of sorts, so that way we're building a functional relationship. So that way further on down the road, if we need some sort of resources that right now MPD is not obligated to provide us, there is a kindness and a functional working relationship that is seen. We're being transparent with them. They can be transparent with us. Now, I'm not here. I'm not going to editorialize that and say whether or not this is an effective process or whether or not that is worth changing. But that's how I see it. Now, if this is the year of potential change with public safety in this city, right? But to dare to expand this scope a little bit, we need to be looking at the functions of this body and the role that we want to play in public safety now as this current group, but also in the future. Do we want to keep wielding a paintbrush? Do we want to be, working in a way that inherently, by the requirements of our criteria of joining this commission, is working hand in hand with the police? Do we want to go about it in a different way? Do we want to ask for or seek some sort of authority that is different or lacking for what we have now? This is a long-winded way of me essentially saying I see that there's a role for the police to be in there because it helps us build relationships with the police department in the future. I'm not saying whether or not that is necessary, but I think that's the purpose of the officer being there. And I think it's worth a discussion of whether or not that is something this body wants to continue doing, but we should be intentional if we want to end some sort of dynamic like that.
Thank you. Recognizing Commissioner Crockett.
All right. And congrats, Vice Chair
Commissioner
Sparks.
Crockett, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, can you hear me? Or no? You can hear me? Oh, okay, cool. And congrats to you as well, Commissioner Sarah, on your appointment. But it just wanted to make some quick remarks on my experience, being interviewed and that whole process on the topic. I do remember specifically in my interview that I was asked like a question or two by the officers, and I wouldn't say it was bothering or anything like that, but I do remember thinking like, oh, that's interesting. The police chief or whoever it was, like they must need to approve of the entire commission, and that was kind of my interpretation of the officer being there. Is just I thought it was really interesting, and it kind of goes to Commissioner Pino's point of like what how do we want to be intentional moving forward? What does that kind of look like? But that's it. Just wanted to share my experience.
Thank you. And Commissioner Pino, is your hand still up or are your remarks complete?
My remarks are complete.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Then I recognize myself, Chair Sarah. I really appreciate all the comments from the other commissioners. In terms of painting with a paintbrush and that kind of metaphor, I will note that under the ordinance, the police department and all city departments are required to work with OPCR and the PCOC to the extent that data would be needed or some sort of partnership would be needed. I mean, that's already required by the ordinance. And I would just like to suggest for, later discussions, but I think there are other ways to build up that relationship, working relationship with the police department, such as perhaps a monthly meeting with the director, the joint supervisors, and in that space, everyone would already be appointed, and there wouldn't be this kind of power dynamic that we're fearing now. So those are my thoughts. Does anyone else have Commissioner Sylvester, recognizing Commissioner Sylvester?
So I apologize if this is just part of my ignorance here, but I don't believe I went through any sort of formal background check to be a part of this commission. Does anybody know if we actually go through background checks to be a part of this commission?
I can speak to that. There's no formal background check for membership on this commission. It's something that we've considered, but at this point, if there was, it would have been an elaborate document that you would have signed and been fully aware of. But no, that's not something that you had to do.
Okay. So I've had probably 24 background checks in my life, and aside from the need of a background check, like a formal background check, and I absolutely don't agree with excluding people with active complaints against the cops from this commission. I think that's maybe a group of people that we definitely need to hear from. But aside from that, I don't really even see a need for input from the police on commission members. But I do agree that some sort of formal meeting structure probably needs to take place, an ongoing formal meeting structure, in order to build ongoing relationships.
Recognizing Commissioner Vice Chair Sparks.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I agree with Commissioner Sylvester's comments about ongoing formal meeting structure. I think that is a lot more constructive, and that helps to build the certainly trust with the commission, but also the one-on-one personal trust, personal interactions, personal rapport is very important. And I think there's a lot to be gained there, and that's something we haven't been getting. So that's very good insight, and I agree with that.
Recognizing Commissioner Pino.
This is a question directed towards staff. To what extent is the PCOC, I mean, we're all expressing our opinions on the recruitment process. Do we have any input on that recruitment process?
I can take this one. This is Assistant City Attorney Fussy. That's not part of the enumerated authority of the commission. So I'm careful on that. Obviously, it affects you greatly. It's adjacent to all of the work that you're doing. And so I think it's probably appropriate to have a discussion about it, but there's no specific authority that the PCOC retains over that process.
So our comments here are articulated, but we can't make any formal motion or action or direction in any way.
I would largely say that's correct. I mean, you can always make a motion to request a meeting or send a communication, but largely this is in an area that's not within your formal authority. And I've been careful lately. I do think it would help maybe move these meetings by more efficiently and the work of the commission more efficiently, to hew more closely to what that authority and duties are that are articulated within the ordinance, because I think to some degree that's fallen by the wayside. But that being said, obviously you do a broad range of topics that you look at and that are within your duties to look at. The primary duty that the commission has, though, is to make recommendations regarding police policies. And that's kind of the meat and potatoes, so to speak. And I know that there's a lot of time spent on other issues. This would be one example of it, and I'm not in any way diminishing the importance of it, but at the end of the day, it's not within your enumerated authority or charge.
Thank you, Mr. Fussy. And this might be a good point to mention is that PCOC, current members are not included in this interview process. So we wouldn't have any sort of say or observing power. One thing we could do is contact council and the mayor and ask for a staff direction or recommend a change, a change in this, policy or a change to the ordinance, something like that. So that is one thing we could do as a commission. And I do think it's worth discussing because, who sits on this commission obviously impacts hugely what we discuss and what policies we put forward and what speakers we invite and, all of that. So I do actually think the selection process is really relevant to our work. Is there any further discussion on that particular, I guess I brought up, we spoke on the MPD participation, but we didn't speak on as much on the requirement that you cannot have an open complaint against police officers. I'll try to articulate sort of what the community member was saying to us via email, was that he did not think that was, relevant or a good use of, like that wasn't a good requirement because he thinks it would be valuable for someone who has gone through the complaint process to sit on the commission and provide, just like perspective, like this is what the complaint process looked like for me and so on. And he mentioned, and I believe this is correct, that if you do have an open complaint against a police officer, number one, that takes a lot of time. Number two, we don't look at individual complaints, nor do we discuss them. And, we don't really get to look at any detailed information ever. So the chance that anyone on this commission could influence the outcome of an individual complaint, I just don't see how that could happen under the current structure of the PCOC. I think I've summed up the community members' concerns. Would anyone else like to address that particular concern or that particular point? I don't see any hands. I will say that I share that community member's concern. I don't want to exclude anybody. And a community member also said that there's a large, I can't remember the statistics exactly, but that fact has an adverse impact on the African American community because they tend to make complaints or have a larger proportion of complaints, something of that nature. And so that could reduce the number of applicants from the African American community. I believe Commissioner McGuire had her hand up first, recognizing Commissioner McGuire.
I was wondering if did we have the rationale behind why that group is excluded? Is it a privacy issue? Are we saying there's a bias? That wasn't clear to me why that group is singled out for exclusion from the commission.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. So again, I could one of those I can speak to it in a historical context. So I know that's been a requirement for a while. I think like one of the explanations I provided recently is, I mean, there are some similar precedents with like especially with the city, just with like if you want to go for like run for union leadership, you can't have an open complaint. So if and I know that we have something like that for the panel. For the panel, I think there was like a 5-year requirement, which I'd actually asked that they removed last year because that just seemed like that was prohibitive. Since 5 years is obviously quite a long time, which they did. So both of them had stayed. It just stayed as you can't have an open complaint. And I think the idea was that, with people applying might not always know the scope of the body or the difference between the two. And so it was just kind of ensuring that people weren't doing this with the interest of adjudicating their own complaints. With that said, I mean, I think I shared this, I said this last year as well. It's like, I don't have any, it's not my, I don't have any strong hard feelings on this. And I'm happy to talk to OPCR staff. Like we had spoke with equity staff last year and about this. And I actually had thought that it was gone last year. I was trying to look back at historical pages, but I think it was still there. So I don't really have any significant objections to it. It's not some rule that I've built my entire livelihood on. It was there before I got here. So, but yeah, so it's definitely something. Let me see who I can talk to and we'll see what we can figure out.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Recognizing Commissioner Sylvester.
Thank you so much. To me, this feels like buying asteroid insurance on my house, right? Like the chance that somebody who has an open complaint against the police is going to apply for this compared to the entire population of Minneapolis, like the applicant population, is probably relatively small, right? But it's an outsized group of people who might want to talk about the conduct of the police, right? And so I think this is probably, I'm really happy to hear Andrew's comments on this. This seems like a pretty light lift to get rid of, And I think it could probably mean a lot to a group of people that we really want to hear from, that I really want to hear from.
Thank you. Commissioner McGuire, did you have additional comments?
That was my question, just to understand if we needed to discuss whatever that rationale is, but it doesn't sound like there is any further discussion there.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions at all about any part of the PCOC appointment process? Commissioner Sylvester.
Hey, I'm wondering on this last point, I'm wondering if we can maybe make some waves on this tonight. And is there any way we can send a communication maybe to council or somebody else who has the ability to get rid of this one little provision? Is there any way that we could, like as a group, maybe push forward some movement on this position or this provision tonight?
Yes, Commissioner Sylvester. I believe we could make a motion if you would care to do so. And if the commission voted to move that forward, I, as the chair, could represent whatever the commission asked of me to council and the mayor, or whichever office it needs to go to.
Okay. Well, this would be my first motion ever, but I move that we make a recommendation as a body to get rid of this provision.
And that is the provision prohibiting an open a complaint against the police officers.
Yes. Anybody with an open complaint against the police officer from applying for the PCOC.
Thank you. Is there a second to Commissioner Sylvester's?
Second from Commissioner Pino.
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll on Commissioner Sylvester's motion?
Commissioner Sarah?
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett?
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire?
Aye.
Commissioner Pino?
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks?
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester?
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Very well, that motion carries. Thank you for the suggestion, Commissioner Sylvester. And I, as chair, will act on behalf of the commission and contact the council accordingly. And, Mr. Hawkins, you've heard this whole thing, so you're getting our feedback. So if you want to start moving on that faster, please do. But I think you've heard our opinion on that. I would like to make a motion. Commissioner Sarah makes a motion to, in the same communication, recommend no participation, not even observatory participation, by any MPD officer. And I'll just share that I'm not making this as a comment on any individual officer at all. Rather, it's more of just sort of the chilling effect or the intimidating effect that we want to avoid, and we want as many people to feel comfortable in the interview process as possible, and that's why I'm bringing this motion. Is there a second to the motion?
Commissioner Sparks, I'll second.
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll on Chair Sarah's motion?
Commissioner Sarah?
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett?
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire?
Aye.
Commissioner Pino?
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks?
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester?
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
Thank you. That motion carries, and I will communicate both points to the council. And as we have mayoral staff and other city staff on the call, just please be advised that this is the motion that the commission is taking, and we'd like to move forward on it. Thank you all for that discussion. The next point of business for discussion is staff interaction with the Police Conduct Oversight Commission. There have been a flurry of emails sort of behind the scenes, not public, on some different points. And given open meeting law, we can't discuss them with each other, and we can't, so I wanted to just bring this forward and have some discussion. I will say that there was one email in particular directed at a commissioner that was particularly dismissive and vitriolic, unnecessarily so. The commissioner was raising a very valid question about just what is quorum, and I read the ordinance this way, and it was a perfectly professional, email and question to raise, and there was just this vitriolic response from staff. And I think it's worth bringing up because it's not the first time that there's been this sort of, like emotional response from staff. I'm personally having some interactions trying to arrange a subcommittee meeting, and I'm asking questions of a particular city staff member in the city attorney's office, and also receiving like that level of vitriol in their response. So I'm bringing it up before the commission, and I'd like to open it up for anyone else to offer comments or questions now that we finally have a meeting where we can discuss it. Did any commissioner wish to offer any further comment or question? Well, then I don't think there's, Commissioner, I can't say who went first. Commissioner Pino? Recognizing Commissioner Pino.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'll simply say that I haven't been directly involved in these. I've kind of, I know I am somewhat aware of what you're talking about, Chair Sarah, but I just want to speak from my own personal experience. I've never seen anything but respect from the staff here. I know that some others don't feel the same way, and everyone is absolutely entitled to not only their opinion, but they're entitled to the same level of respect that anyone who spends their time, spending evenings volunteering deserves. And I know that tensions run high, and in the past 2 years, tensions have run higher than most. I think it has been a failure on everyone's parts, both staff, PCOC, myself included, that sometimes we see that we have this viewpoint that we're not all on the same side. And I think that it is incumbent upon us that even when we are stressed, and even when we're having discussions between volunteers who come and attend these meetings, and staff and PCOC, even though things are tense sometimes, we are all spending our personal time here in a lot of regards, trying to get something done. And the fact that we haven't been able to do that to the extent that I think anyone has wanted so far this year is a collective disappointment. It's important that we don't turn that disappointment on each other in any regards. I do think everyone here, whether they're staff appointed or a volunteer, are here with the best intentions. And I'm committed to moving forward in that regard, water under the bridge in any situation.
Thank you. Commissioner Sylvester?
I'm sorry, I think Vice Chair Sparks was before.
Oh, beg your pardon. Vice Chair Sparks? I think you're muted, Vice Chair Sparks.
You're right. Thank you. I was muted. I guess my comments just mirror what Commissioner Pino said in a lot of ways. I'll just keep them brief. But I mean, we're all here for the same reason, the right reason. We're all here to improve things. We're all here at night. We all have more fun, more interesting things I think we'd rather be doing. I think a lot of us have kids we'd rather be spending time with. And it's important to recognize that everybody on the commission, on city staff, we're all giving up a lot of time that would otherwise be good, solid personal time to come here and do this important work on behalf of the public. So I will say that virtually everybody that I interact with on the city staff has been incredible. Very positive, very helpful, definitely going above and beyond expectations very consistently, and those interactions are nearly all very positive. And I just want to say that I appreciate everybody on the commission and everybody on staff and everybody who's a member of the public listening. Teamwork makes the dream work, and thanks for being there with us.
Thank you for the teamwork phrase. Thank you. Commissioner Sylvester.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments also. But I will say, to me, there's like three fundamental groups trying to work together here. There's city staff and incredible work that they're doing, and probably one of the hardest times in memory. There's us, right? Like trying to figure out our place in this new reality after the murder of George Floyd that we honestly find ourselves in. But we have a pretty dedicated group of citizens who interact with this commission on a real regular basis, almost a daily basis via email, right? And like, there's nothing in my life that I think I'm committed to the point where these people are committed to this work, right? Like I love this work and I love being part of this commission, right? But there are people that we interact with via email from the public who are just astoundingly knowledgeable and committed to this type of work in a way that I don't know if I could ever be. And that's my fundamental issue with the communication that I saw this week, is that those people weren't necessarily being respected, right? I mean, you can holler at me all you want, right? Like I rate, and when you start hollering at members of the public, that's where I draw the line. And so I really appreciate you bringing this up.
Thank you. Well, I think I intended this to be a discussion item. I don't have any motions. I haven't heard any motions from the group. So maybe just in summary, I will say that, speaking for the commission, we greatly appreciate each other. We greatly appreciate the city staff who make this meeting possible. And we greatly appreciate all the members of the public who spend so much time engaging with us and providing us with information. And maybe this is just a moment for all of us, perhaps to hit reset and move forward with as much kindness and empathy as we can muster, even when there's really tough discussions, because there's going to be really tough discussions, and that's just the nature of the commission. So thank you all for engaging on that point. Okay, I believe without any further discussion on that point, I believe that brings me to the next item on the agenda, which is the reports from the subcommittees. So I recognize Commissioner Pino, who is very anxious to present the Audit Committee's report. Please take it away.
I'm always happy to give my Audit Subcommittee report, but I will keep it brief. We had two major items of business for the Audit Subcommittee, and this was, need I remind people, over a period of two audit subcommittees. We had a presentation from Christopher Brandt in the on no-knock warrants. He's creating a quantitative analysis of non-announced search warrants within our jurisdiction. It's really interesting. We're hoping to have that the timeline of this sort of research be completed by the end of the year, which would be ideal. That information, if you're interested, is within item 5 of the regular September meeting of the PCOC Audit Subcommittee agenda. We also had a quick discussion on coaching as well. For those of you who might remember, we are, in addition to the presentation that this full committee received in coaching, there's also some ongoing legal discussions going on in terms of coaching. Unfortunately, that has somewhat stalled our ability to have a exploratory analysis of coaching, and we are hoping to get a more detailed understanding of the extent to which that has hindered the ability for us to explore coaching by Mr. Hawkins in our next subcommittee meeting. And so we are awaiting that. Those were the two major items that we talked about in Audit Subcommittee, and we're more than happy to take on more if the committee refers any more research and study to us.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Pino. I have a question. It's been over a year when we opened the research and study in conjunction with the Trans Equity Council. I was wondering, I don't mean to put you on the spot, if there's an update on that, or if we should wait until the next meeting for that.
We have not received an update on that as of yet. The last time we talked about it, again, I may be wrong, was June. I can follow back up with Cassidy, who is the person who's part of Civil Rights, who has been leading that project, and I'll get an answer back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Commissioner Pino? Great, thank you. Okay. With that and without objection, I will direct the clerk to receive and file this report from Commissioner Pino. Next, I recognize myself, who will present the Policy and Procedure Subcommittee report. I actually have a lot of things. So, one, we've been working with HCMC kind of behind the scenes, talking about medical training and so on and so forth. HCMC generously offered to provide ride-alongs for any member of this commission who would like one, and I'm happy to coordinate that. I believe you would ride in an ambulance and, you know, see what an emergency call is like. And we are blessed with a commissioner whose day job is to work as an HCMC paramedic. So Commissioner Sylvester, if you would like to maybe just say a few words about that.
Yeah. So not to contradict, you would ride in a GMC Yukon, like a chief's vehicle, basically, with a member of our command staff. We could set it up anytime that, you know, works for your schedule, preferably evenings, just for a little more spice in your life. And it's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, I think, for a lot of people to see from a literal front row seat the interaction between the police, fire, and EMS. The kind of calls that we go on, the kind of calls that, you know, how emergency medicine interacts with the police. We share the same computer-aided dispatch system with police and fire in the city of Minneapolis, so you'll get to understand kind of the way that police and fire and EMS calls are dispatched in Minneapolis, the amount of information or the lack of information that we get, and the difference between the 2 or 3 sentences that arrive prior to arriving on scene, and then the entire complexity of what's actually going on. So if anybody's interested, I mean, we'll even give you, I think it even comes with like a bullet resistant vest, you know, if like safety is a concern for you. But we've got a lot of elected officials that have done that so far this year. We've got a lot of community members that have come along, usually a couple per week. So if anybody's interested, we'd love to have you as a guest.
Thank you, Commissioner Sylvester, and thank you to HCMC Partners for offering that opportunity to us. So I'll just take it offline. If anyone's interested, if you could just send me an email, and we'll get you in the Yukon. The next part is this is kind of a long story, but back in December, Jones Day Law Firm offered pro bono services to the city attorney's office, and in regard to negotiating the labor contract for the MPD. And City Council gave a staff direction to the city attorney and Jones Day that they should confer with the PCOC, just to kind of, you know, like have a level of transparency and communication with the public. So the first such meeting will be next Monday, and I will be attending as chair, and I will provide more information as I receive it. So just so you know that is happening in the background. Also, I did have a meeting with a few members, with the city attorney City Attorney Rauter and Mr. Fussy to discuss PCOC access to data. Thank you both. I'm going to sum this up, and Mr. Fussy, I'm sure you're on the line. You can make sure that I'm relaying this properly. Today, without any changes at all to ordinances or anything like that, we, the PCOC, do have access or should have access to non-identifying demographic data. So, just listing the race of all participants, we should have access to that information when we're doing our case review studies or having other kinds of discussions. So no ordinance change or staff direction is needed in order for us to access that demographic information that we've been asking for. However, in order to access private or confidential data, that would require a change in the existing ordinance. It would be an ask to council, essentially. Legal minds can differ on kind of what needs to happen around that, but essentially today, what would be needed is council to take some action and change the ordinance and give us explicit access to private and confidential data. And that is relevant because, for example, anything that would identify parties within the complaints, I think that could be considered private. There might be, like, if there were discipline imposed, but it was still pending, so it wasn't public yet, that would still be private. There were roadblocks that we have been coming up against with where we needed some information, we haven't been able to get it. So I just wanted to share that with the group. And Mr. Fussy, did I summarize that legal discussion correctly? And do you have anything to add or to share with the commission?
Yeah, I think you did. I think that wraps it up pretty well.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions on that point? Hearing no questions or further discussion, then what I would like to do is I hereby make a motion to the commission that as a chair, I contact the city council and request some sort of legislative action, if you will, so that we can access private and confidential data. I see a hand up, Commissioner Sylvester, recognizing you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think there was a couple other hands up before me. I think Commissioner Sparks and Commissioner Pino.
I didn't mean to have my hand up. That was a mistake.
I think it's just you, Commissioner Sylvester.
I had my hand up just to make sure we recognize the other commissioners. I apologize.
Okay. I believe Mr. Hawkins has his hand up. Mr. Hawkins, did you want to address the commission?
Yep. One of the things I just wanted to make sure I clarify too is, like, going back historically when the commission has worked with, like the PCOC, it's like the reason that we've been paired together is that, you have this, like, the reason that civilian staff are supporting this group is that they're the ones that are doing the day-to-day work. They're the subject matter experts, and so like the idea was that, there's no expectation. I mean, again, there's no reasonable expectation that you can bring in people for this commission. We definitely try to find people with diverse backgrounds, which I think we've done, and we found people that have an interest and some knowledge of public safety. But the idea that, they're going to serve and have the time to do, like the micro level analysis, I don't think was ever there. And it was more that would be, like the macro higher level stuff, but like where the, the piece was connected is that, whether it's Britta or Chris or Nick or Carolina or whoever it is, it's like they're coming in, day out to, look at cases, do the work, to have that stuff. And so I know we've talked about confusion with, like, well, how do we identify trends? How do we do this? And I think, like, that's one of the things that certainly, we kind of talked about encouraging communication. And I think that's one of the areas where you can do it is that, you have these people that are watching, some of them are watching, hours of body camera every day. Some of them are, going through, be very comprehensive case investigations day in, day out. And so the fact that they have, like that level of access, which is actually fairly unique even for a civilian oversight organization in the country, is like, that's one of the biggest tools that's there, where it's, I mean, for example, like I'm on a community health commission, and, like just through joining the commission, like I don't think there was any expectation that I had any additional knowledge, and it's the city staff that, I can lean on to provide, that updated information. I mean, again, I feel like it's relevant because it's a topic that's, again, outside of policing, it's probably the next thing where we're obviously, in a pandemic and stuff, so there's a lot going on there. So I did just want to, like, sort of kind of reestablish that, because I do think that sometimes that gets lost, where, one of the biggest resources that's, that OPCR has the ability to provide is staff that have the subject matter expertise. for you to be able to ask the questions you need to ask, and let them pull from the well of all of the work that they're doing every day. So like I said it before, it's any opportunity I have to jump in and speak on behalf of our staff and the work that they do, I'm always gonna definitely jump on it. So
thank you. Recognizing Commissioner Pino.
All right, so first question that I have, I just want to make sure that, because the new interpretation of what we're allowed to have, what we're not allowed to have, I love the fact that we're getting new information. I just want to make sure I understand it. I care about getting as much aggregated data as we can. For instance, I don't care about a particular case that's going on at 36th and Hennepin. I care about generally for a given area or a given precinct, how many complaints involved someone who is detained by police who is a woman, for instance. Given the most recent interpretation, and I want to make sure that if there isn't consensus, that the powers that be speak up on this. Are we able to receive that a higher level of aggregated information than what we're currently getting now, or what we have in the past?
Would Mr. Fussy be able to answer that question? I think the answer is yes. But.
Yeah, and what I'm weighing in on, I don't go through the cases. I don't provide any of that. I don't call that data. But in terms of our position has always been that you are not allowed to have private personnel data, but you are allowed to have summary and aggregate, non-identifiable, individualized data. And I don't know exactly how that fits into what data is available in these case summaries, but I know there's probably more data out there that would demographic type data that would be summary and aggregate data, and therefore would be public data that could be released to you. I'm just not, I don't know if that exists on every case or if it's going to be a perfect set of data, but there is more data out there that would fall in the category of summary and aggregate and non-identifiable, it would be in the public realm of data.
Okay, based off of that, for instance, these case summaries, are we now allowed to add in a gender, race, and an age range identifier to each of those case summaries? An individual was detained during this stop who was Black between the age of 35 and 45 and is a woman, for instance. Or is that because those categories are technically PII, would that be a violation of our publicizing private information, essentially?
I generally think there's more room to allow that sort of data, and I think Mr. Hawkins has said that that's something that they're be able to provide. Obviously, if you drill it, it's a kind of a subjective test. You can't get too specific in it. It cannot be individually identifiable. So there are ways to do that in which it's more broad categories, and I think that's something that can be done.
Okay, because if that is the case, personally, I'm satisfied. In fact, I tend to agree with the argument that I don't want to be burdened with the knowledge of knowing individual privacy, information, and what that comes with. Because all of a sudden, if I'm not playing by the rules, then I might get in trouble for disclosing information. I'd much rather have someone else, an intermediary, at least be able to be cleaning up the information enough to be able to give us substantive data to at the core of what we're trying to do here is understand trends in policing practices and how it applies to policy. And as long as we're able to do that, I think we are, given the interpretation of what we just said. I personally do not feel the need to ask for, more information than what it seems like OPCR is now able and willing to provide to us.
Commissioner Sylvester?
I think Commissioner Pino brings up a really great point. I don't really care about individual identifiable pieces, but what I care about, I guess, is like broad spectrum. How many people are being arrested for misdemeanor offenses in the 1st precinct in the month of July? And I've always been deeply uncomfortable with this idea of like giving us a handful of cases to choose from, and then we look at those cases. There's not enough data and there's not enough background. My experience as a first responder is that like you give me this very, very narrow set of information, right? But there's absolutely nothing simple about anything that we do, right? And so I keep constantly going back. I don't know if any of you remember this, but we got a case where somebody said the cop showed up, threw a guy to the ground, put a gun to his head, and threatened him, right? I'll never forget this case. And as I tried to tease out the information in that case from city staff, I feel like we kind of came to the conclusion that multiple body cameras were looked at and no evidence of this ever happening was found, right? So I don't really care about the individual complaint that was filed. I care about broad spectrum. How many people are being arrested for misdemeanors in the 1st precinct? How many times, like how long is it taking officers to respond to calls in the 4th precinct? How many, officers are available for calls in the 2nd precinct? Like I kind of care about broad data on a precinct level to really kind of evaluate MPD versus these small, and I guess I'll call them salacious, like it feels very salacious, these small salacious snippets that I'm asked to choose from. You know what I mean? So I guess if I want to look at data, I want to look at system data. Like I'm not trying to just pick individual cases that are given to me by another body with almost no real valuable detail in them, right? That I'm just supposed to say, oh my gosh, wow, this guy had a gun put to his head, but there's no data, or I have to tease out that there's no evidence to back that up. You know what I mean?
Point well taken, and I think I will withdraw my motion. I think this is a discussion better had with our next agenda item, which is recommendations from staff, because I think we need to understand like how they would like us to move forward in our case reviews, because this is all wound up in our case reviews. This isn't really like the research and studies that we're doing. So I withdraw the motion. The only other update I have is that our next meeting is going to be really exciting. We finally got the data on misdemeanor arrests. We have a data scientist from St. Thomas who is able to like pull all the data and make some beautiful visual charts for us. And we've been working on this for months, and I'm really excited. So that's happening. With that, where's my script? With that, and without objection, I direct the clerk to receive and file this report. Moving on to our next item is our discussion item. At last month's meeting, we received a presentation by OPCR investigators regarding a proposed new process for reviewing case summaries. At the time, we discussed the new format and asked staff to make some refinements. I'll now ask OPCR staff to present the work they've done.
Hi everyone, I'm Berta Mamani and I'm a case investigator with OPCR. As Chair Sarah mentioned, I presented the recommended process for case summaries at both the July and August meetings, and then I also walked through what the case sample summary would look like. So tonight I just want to give a brief summary of some of the benefits that we think the proposed process will bring, and then also walk through the specific revisions that we made to the case summary sample based on some of the suggestions that you all gave us at that last meeting. So to begin with some of those benefits, we believe that the new case summary process will help increase transparency and then also facilitate community engagement because it will make the case summaries public, available online at the beginning of the month, so that the public won't have to wait for case summaries to be presented at the PCOC meeting. That way they can access those summaries ahead of the meetings, hopefully come prepared to the meetings with any questions or comments that they may have, so that we can help facilitate community engagement. And then at the same time is not dependent on whether there's quorum or not. Additionally, the new process would be conducive to promoting the auditing and monitoring functions of the PCOC, since it relies on that case categorization, random generation, and then also representative case samples. So as you all met earlier, there's Carolina Amini, who is the case investigations manager, and she's going to speak to some of the benefits that she sees with the new process as well. So Carolina, if you want to jump in now.
Yeah, thank you, Britta. Being a case or an intake investigator previously and now in this current role, I believe that this allows it to be more transparent. It provides a lot more information that we currently were doing a few years back, and I think it's an excellent way to provide more information to both the public and to the commission. So thank you very much, Britta. This looks wonderful.
Great. So thank you so much, Carolina. So I know at the August meeting, you all had brought up some suggestions as far as information that you thought would be helpful, and we've kind of reframed those tonight. So I know that specifically the inclusion of demographic data was mentioned, and then also precinct data, and then there was a mention of a range for each policy violation. So I'm happy to report that you all can you see the new case summary sample pulled up? Lisa, do you have that, or would you mind pulling that up?
I'm pulling that up now.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Can you see this?
Great. So like I said, I'm happy to report that we were able to include all of your suggestions in the revised version of this case summary sample. So now you can see that on the cover page, there is a reported demographics section, and this includes the self-reported race, gender, and then also the police precinct in which the incident occurred. And then you can also see that the MPD policy manual range column has been added, and that is, Lisa, if you could scroll up a little bit. Perfect, thank you. So that MPD policy manual range is right next to this policy implicated section, and that includes the range for each allegation. So yeah, like I said, I'm happy to report that we were able to work with the city attorney and include all of your suggestions from the last meeting in the case summary sample. So this is, I guess, our final draft version of what the case summary would look like. And that concludes my overview of the benefits and then also the revisions that we made. Does anyone have any follow-up questions based on those comments?
Commissioner Pino.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for making the revisions and the work that you've done on this. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Second that. Commissioner Sparks.
I also just want to thank you so much for all of the work and consideration that went into this. I am amazed. I think this is exactly what we were hoping for, better than I was hoping for. I think you really outdone yourself.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Yeah, this looks fantastic. Thank you very much.
Great, and thank you so much for all your suggestions.
I'm going to raise my hand and recognize myself, Chair Sarah. This looks fantastic. Thank you. I have a question, and it's only because I don't have it in front of me, and I'm just trying to scroll. Is it still the case? So we have the case samples. Is it still the case that we would also have sort of an aggregate data report or maybe statistical data for the entire year for, there were 10,000 arrests or 10,000 complaints and, like a aggregate data report so that we could see big picture and then we could see these smaller samples.
Do you want me to jump in, Britta, or do you got that?
Sure, go ahead, Andrew.
I know I didn't want to step. I didn't know if if we had connected on that one or not. But yes, is I mean, our plan is still to do. That's one of the things that we're trying to add to the website where we have more of like the aggregate data type information. But Britta, I feel like I stepped on you, so I'm going to let you finish up on that topic.
Thank you for stepping in. I wasn't quite sure on that point, but I do recall that we would do like a quarterly report as far as the cases that you all have reviewed. So that kind of aids in your auditing and monitoring function, and then kind of get that big picture lens so that you can reflect on all the case summaries that you'd seen throughout that quarter, and then I believe also throughout the year.
Excellent. This is terrific. Any other questions or concerns from the commission? Okay. With that and without objection, I will direct the clerk to receive and file this presentation. Our next order of business is to consider adoption of the recommended process. Do I have a motion to consider adoption?
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Sylvester. Are there any questions from commissioners or discussion on the motion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Sarah.
Aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye. Sorry.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Aye.
Chair Sarah, there are 6 ayes.
Terrific. That motion carries by unanimous vote. Thank you all, and thank you again to city staff for making that possible and really sticking with us and listening to our concerns. I appreciate that. Okay, public hearing. The next order of business is a public hearing. In order to implement the new case summaries format, we will need to make a slight amendment to our operating rules. Those same rules require that we provide an opportunity for public comment when we propose amendments to our operational rules. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing, and if there's anyone on the line who would like to speak, you'll have 2 minutes. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name for the record.
Hello, this is Dave Bicking. Yes, I would actually encourage you to vote no against this rule change. Let me explain. The summary example that you discussed, I think, is quite good. I don't have a problem with that. It's certainly better than the very abbreviated ones that were suggested at the beginning of the year and were never actually then heard. What I'm concerned about is the selection of the case summaries. And this rule change actually gives the commission a little bit more power to adopt and modify the procedures than it had before, when it was determined that it had to select 3 items from the set for review. So the rule change makes it more permissive. Unfortunately, though, I think the rule change is being done in order to permit a selection process recommended by the staff, which is not in the interests of the commission or especially the public. The suggestion was that, I forget how many cases will be chosen at the beginning of the year, and 5 looked at each month. But what it removed, that suggestion, not the rules, but that suggestion removed the possibility of the commission and the public seeing 10 synopses and their outcomes selected at random, and it removed the decision-making capability of the PCOC to determine which ones they wanted to get full summaries of. I think that's a step backwards. Having random cases selected gave a possibility of making a statistical look at how many, were dismissed right away and for what reasons, how many went to coaching, et cetera. So I think that was a valuable thing to have those synopses, and a valuable thing for you to be able to select which cases you see, that rather than have them selected for you. So the rule change doesn't, put into place the suggestion from the staff, which I disapprove of, but it permits that thing. So if you do vote to change the rules here, I would then hope and urge that you not adopt you might adopt that format that you just talked about, but that you not adopt the selection process that has been recommended by the staff. I think it takes power away from the PCOC and it takes information away from the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bicking. Any other community comment? Please press *6 to unmute yourself. I will now close the public comment period and ask if any of my fellow commissioners would like to speak to this matter, or if you have any questions for Assistant City Attorney Joel Fussy on this amendment to our operating rules.
And Madam Chair, maybe if I could briefly just address the amendment quickly. And Lisa, are you able to bring up the actual text of the amendment? I think it was linked. It's pretty simple change to rule number 10, I believe. Thank you. And so there you go. You see the current, well, you see rule 10 right now. The new language is underlined and the language that is proposed to be stricken is struck through with a line. And so if you see this, what this rule does is simply give you as a commission more power to design and modify the case selection policy and procedure as you see fit. And I would point out that you've already adopted that new case. That was the action you just took. The good news is with this rule, as you work through this new process, if there is a desire to modify or change it, you'll be able to do that without the need of going through rule changes in this sort of process again. It'll be much more nimble and flexible. So I think this is essentially a formality to back up the action that you've already taken, and it does give you that future flexibility that if there are different directions you want to go, you'll be able to do that much more simply now.
Thank you, Mr. Fussy. Any questions or comments for Mr. Fussy from the commission? I'd just like to note that at one point we did have a rules subcommittee that went the way of all things, but perhaps this is an indication that we should bring it back, you know, just if things of this nature come up again in the future. Okay. If there is no further discussion or questions, do I have a motion to approve this amendment to our operating rules?
Motion to approve this amendment to our operating rules.
We have a motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'll ask the clerk to call roll on the motion to amend the operating rules.
Chair Sarah.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Crockett.
Aye.
Commissioner McGuire.
Aye.
Commissioner Pino.
Aye.
Commissioner Sparks.
Aye.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Aye.
There are 6 ayes.
That motion carries, and I believe the rules will be amended. With that, we've concluded all items on our agenda for this meeting. I'll see everyone back here next month for the regular November meeting. Seeing no further business to come before us and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.